Hey Bree, so quick video. I went through my things and I actually didn't have any anchor charts or nice visuals for nouns and verbs. So I purchased one only because this was really inexpensive, and it's on the verb page right now, but it's got a page for nouns and it has, I don't know if you can see, it's got a lot of other things in there. It's got pronouns and a ton of other stuff that you probably will not need, but I did want to make a video about it because there's just a couple of things to consider when you're doing this. So when I have kids like Max who, have pretty significant intellectual disabilities and learning difficulties, I don't typically teach nouns and verbs for the purpose of creating sentences. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why. It doesn't matter to me how you want to do it, but if you do choose to do it this way, if you kind of go through the nouns and verbs and having him, sort or define, a couple of things to keep in mind. So I'm not going to show the noun page, but on the noun page, it says what nouns are, how a noun is a person, place, or thing. And it was nice. It color coded everything and it kind of gave examples for each. And then it showed the pictures. And then for verbs, it says verbs are words that show action, and then it gives you your examples. Now, whether you have these pictures or very realistic photos, it doesn't really matter. I tend to run into the same problem with both. And the problem is not so much the noun as it is the verb, to be honest. And I don't know if you can see. So like for the word jump, right? The word is jump, but the picture is of a boy jump roping. And for smile, the word is smile, but the picture is of a boy. And for fly, it's a picture of a butterfly flying. Now, where kids like Max tend to get confused is, everything almost feels like a noun because they're looking at the picture and they're not as focused on the word. So when it comes to like trying to help them conceptualize and understand that a verb is an action, when you add visuals, it can almost be more confusing because the visual is of a noun, but that the word itself is of a verb. So the best way to do this, if you are going to do nouns and verbs, is to really, you can use this kind of as your anchor chart, but then when you're doing the actual words, I wouldn't use visuals. I would only use words, and I would be sure that I spent like an entire day just on nouns and kind of going through what they were, and then another entire day just on verbs and really acting them out and just driving home the fact that a verb is something you can do. An action is something you can physically do. And then have him jump and walk and sing and clap and smile and feel how his body is doing it. And that is probably the best way. So then when you go to sort, you can sort onto these anchor charts, but I would probably just sort words and then, kind of say to Max, can you do it? Is it something you can do? Oh, nope. Then is it a person? And then, kind of go through, is it a place? Is it a thing? And kind of go through it like that. Now I actually have had some kids that even when I give them a noun, they're like, yeah, I can do that. Because if you give them something like firefighter or policeman, they get up and they go to act it out, just like we've acted out our verbs. So like you'll have a kid that gets up and like is pretending to spray a house down, with his water hose. He's like, yeah, I can firefighter. So then they think it's an action. And that's where it can get a little tricky and a little bit confusing. So with my higher level kids and kids, that are just more mildly LD, they tend to get this, and these kind of anchor charts, they work really well. Kids like Max who are just more involved, they definitely tend to struggle. And I have some middle school students who are, like in ICT classes, not even the severe self-contained, and they still cannot tell me what a noun and a verb are. So if you want to do this, I'm okay. I understand there's a method to the madness, but this isn't always how I do it. So I'm going to show you what I do instead with kiddos like Max. So if the end goal is creating sentences, I'm not as worried whether or not they know subjects and predicates, because he's never going to write essays. He's not going to be, writing huge paragraphs. This is for basic sentence construction. So where I start is with my sentence scaffolds. And what I'll do is I laminate this whole page and whatever pages I use after, but then I cut these apart. And for Max, I would literally just start right there. And I would only show him the who and the action. And that's where I start. We start with, okay, in order to create a sentence, we put words together, and two really important things that we need to tell who, and we need to tell an action or what they did. And so if you're sorting and you're not at the expressive part yet, I would have Max sort words, not even pictures, to be honest, but just words under each of these. So for the who, he's going to put all his like people words, and then for the action, he would put all of his action words. And even at this stage, I 100%, like, it is still confusing for kids, like what's a person versus an action word. I have them act out the action words. So for the people, we decide if it's a person, and then once they say like running, is that a person? No, it's an action. Then I have them get up and I'm like, let's do it. Even my middle school kids, I still make them do it. We walk across the room, we sing, we clap, we wave, we pretend to take a drink. Like, we do all of the things. So it really is just kind of driving home, like, listen, you need two parts to your sentence. You need the who and you need the action, and the action is something you can do. So when we're doing it, we start making it. You can either have him sort, or like for me, I just write the words down and we make lists. So with my kiddos, I might just say, all right, mom, is that something you can like do? Is that an action, or is that a person, a who? And so we decide what it is, and then he can sort it, or you can just like write it under. And then once we have like 4 or 5 things under each, so we have some people and we have some actions, then I start to show the kids, okay, now to make a sentence, these are the 2 really big parts we need. We're going to put them together and we're going to make it sound like it makes sense. So we're not just going to say, mom, sing. You know, that sounds like caveman talk. We're going to make it sound like a sentence. The mom sings. And then that's it. We just start creating sentences that way. And then once they like get that down really well, then I start to share with them, and we're still just on this first part, just with the who and the action. I go in, because it's laminated, and I'll put a slash, and then I write the word thing, and I'll say, okay, so, and then I put a plus sign there. So I say, okay, so remember, we have 2 parts to our sentence. We have to say who and what they did. But if you don't feel like saying who and you want to make a sentence with a thing, we can do that instead. And then I'll model it like, I want to talk about a stapler. So that's going to be my thing. The stapler staples. That's my action. And then I'll give them a bunch of examples, and then they can sort, or Max can sort into 3 piles. Okay, so now we have 3 different things. We're going to pick which words are actions, which words are people, that's our who, which words are things. And then he can sort into his 3 piles. And then if he's working on creating sentences, then later, once he can sort really good and he knows what things are things, what words are people, which would be the who, and what words are actions, he can pick one thing and one action and start making sentences, or one person and one action and make sentences. And then before I even move on to like the next steps in the scaffold, when we have like a list of action words and a list of who and a list of things, not all of the pairings will make sense. So you might have a kid who picks stapler as his thing, and then his action might be the word sing. But I let them do that, and I'll say, okay, so let's put all that together. The stapler sings. And then I'll tell them, that's a sentence because you've got a thing, or like if it's a person, you have your who and you have your action, but it's a super silly sentence and it doesn't make a lot of sense. So then we go and try and make one that does make sense. And then that kind of gets into like what's silly and what's not silly. And for some of my kids, and believe it or not, I have had a few that are quite like Max in that they don't have a lot of object function, or their vocabularies are really, really low. And so that's kind of nice because it opens a discussion and it helps build vocabulary. And then you're kind of even getting into what makes sense and what doesn't as you're teaching how to create a sentence. So that's pretty much the steps for Max. If you do, if you ever do move on, because I know what's not covered in that is how a noun can also be a place. I don't worry about that with my kids because, again, I don't care if they can define a noun or a verb. I just want them to make sentences. And truly for Max, like if he has perfect sentences, down the line, that's something to worry about later. But if you continue to use these kind of sentence scaffolds, you get into who and then the action and the what. So then that would be like the firefighter sings a song, and then later down there you get into the place. So I start to teach them how to incorporate places into their sentences. So you've got who, action, and where. And then within this packet, it's kind of cool because it even goes, like as you keep going with it, it goes into different sentence structures. And that for Max would be way down the line, but it starts to show how you don't always have to start with who. Sometimes you can start with when and then have the who and the action. And other times you can start with where, and then this packet keeps going and they get really long, and it just kind of shows how you can rearrange all the different parts of a sentence to make a sentence. But basically where you're starting is where he needs to be, which is just with the who and the action, or the thing and the action, which is really all you need to make a sentence. So anyway, if that is kind of the point of nouns and verbs, this is where I would start. And for Max, because receptive is easier than expressive, I think for you guys, your terms would be, I don't know, anting, tacting, I don't know which it is, but whatever the receptive is, whatever like sorting would be, is easier for him than verbally pronouncing it. I would just make sure that he could sort different words into who, action, and action piles, and then into thing, who, and action piles. And in terms of the actions, it is still going to be tricky for him. I know that's why like you were looking for visuals, because getting it, I would have him act it out. So like you can't really, I would just, pick like, I'm trying to think of people like boy. You can't act out boy. You can't do boy. So boy is going to go under who, but you can run. Show me, Max, show me run, and then have him act it out. So it's definitely going to take a lot of teaching, I think, before he gets it. And this is not the kind of like discrete trial kind of thing that he's just gonna get. He's gonna for sure have to get up and like move around and act things out. But eventually, I think just action and who is going to be a lot easier than person, place, or thing, and then actions with pictures, and it just gets crazy. Okay, that's it.